All right, so what's your favorite month of the year? What's your favorite month of the year?
Oh, I don't know if I can narrow it down to one.
Really?
No. I like May. It's my birthday.
Well, there you go.
Okay.
I like June.
It's your birthday. We're very self-focused.
So those are our favorite months of the year. Speaking of favorite months, you know what is objectively the worst month of the year? Objectively the worst. And you might disagree with me, but if you do, you're wrong. The worst month of the year is objectively January. It's objectively January.
Yeah, that's not great.
It has to be. And here's the thing. January, it's still really cold outside. But
no snow.
But there's no snow usually in January. It's usually either February or December for some reason. Skips January altogether. And there's also no Christmas.
No.
It's like a Narnia situation.
Oh.
Like the White Witch. Is that what her name is?
Yeah.
Okay.
For you.
I wasn't sure. Well, it's like the White Witch, right? It's always winter and never Christmas. January is the worst month of the year. So congratulations. We've made it to the worst month of the year.
Yay!
Yay for us.
Okay, but what if somebody has a birthday in January? That's got to make it better.
Yeah, that's
right?
a bummer for them.
Oh,
big time.
all right.
No, well, you know what's funny? Now that I think about it, actually, it's kind of funny because my anniversary is in January.
There you go.
And
hopefully Anna won't watch this. Happy
Sweetie, I'm so
anniversary.
sorry. I love you. I love that we got married in January. It was super cold. And
did you do it outside?
Yeah, the pictures were outside.
Ooh, okay.
That was terrible.
Yeah.
And I have a son. I have a kid whose birthday is in January too.
Okay.
Love you, buddy. But I do still think, objectively speaking.
Yeah, I mean, outside of a January
birthday or
anniversary,
if any of our students have a marriage anniversary in January,
then
But objectively
speaking, January and honestly February.
You think February too?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I think they can be difficult.
Yeah.
Because let's February. What do you think of with February?
Valentine's Day.
And unless you have somebody,
not great.
No,
not great.
It's not at all.
No.
So okay, but seriously, January, February, it does feel like there's a bit of a slump, and especially in like if we're talking about like mental health, isolation, it's hard. And it's difficult when it's just a normal year minus COVID.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like that's a hard time. And like you pile on COVID on top of that, it's even more difficult. And so if there ever was a time, if there ever was a season for us to have a conversation in church about self-care, we have arrived. Here it is.
The thing is, you're probably aware of what self-care is, like generally speaking. We live in a culture that loves to talk about how you can and should care about you and for you, and you're the best in individualistic society, blah, blah, blah. But what if vegging out and watching Netflix for 7 hours isn't the best way for you to take care of you?
No.
What if standing in front of a mirror and practicing your selfie poses isn't the... You're really good at that. Is this something that you do?
No.
Okay.
That's totally making fun of the people that I know who do that.
Okay, cool.
That's where I learned it.
All right, cool. Because I'm like, what if that's not the best way for you to take care of you? In fact, what if that's a thing that nobody should ever do? Ever. I don't.
Ever.
Maybe so that's something. Hopefully we can find a much more fulfilling and truly restorative way to care for yourself this January and February.
Okay, so you would think that the most selfless human being to ever exist, right? Jesus, right? Yeah. He wouldn't need to put a whole lot of focus into self-care. But he was so good at it. He was so good at making sure like his self-care tank was full, right? And for those of us who feel like January 2021 is this crazy mix of chaos and total isolation all at the same time, this lesson on self-care that Jesus teaches his disciples is going to make a huge difference. That's the hope anyway. So we're going to take a look at Mark chapter 4, and we're going to start in verse 35. Okay, so Mark 4:35 tells us, as evening came, Jesus said to his disciples, "Let's cross to the other side of the lake." So they took Jesus in the boat and started out, leaving the crowds behind, although other boats followed. Okay, pause. They took Jesus in the boat. Jesus. Okay, so they're working, and Jesus is already like, yeah, you got, like, take care of it. I'm gonna sit over here. Like, Jesus, who, let's not forget, like, Jesus, God, right? Same being. Okay, he could have, like, boom, whisked everybody over, like, here to here, boom, like, no time at all. But instead, he's like, you do it. Right? Like, I'm gonna sit over here. I have a feeling he's like, feet kicked up, like, the whole thing,
Big
right?
time.
Yeah. So, like, Jesus, why would Jesus do that? I mean, we know he's not a lazy guy, right? I'm guessing, I don't know. I'm guessing he knew his way around a boat. I
would think so.
He lived in Galilee, like,
Sure.
fisherman, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. But notice that Scripture tells us they were in this boat because they were just in the midst of crowds of people. So Jesus had just been teaching crowds of people. And Jesus was pretty well known. So it wasn't like they just left him alone. Like, they wanted to interact with him all the time, ask him all kinds of questions. When he was done, they're like, no, Jesus, hey, can you, right? Like,
Yep.
I mean, it was overwhelming. And so he was probably tired. He needed a break. So he chose to rest. Okay, so let's see what else happens in this story.
But soon a fierce storm came up. High waves were breaking into the boat, and it began to fill with water. Jesus was sleeping at the back of the boat with his head on a cushion. And the disciples woke him up, shouting, "Teacher, like, don't you care that we're going to drown?" And so a fierce storm came up. Have you ever felt this way about like the pandemic? Like the disciples and Jesus, they were out in the middle of a lake, like essentially in isolation, and yet in the middle of this isolation, in the middle of the lake, there was somehow still complete and total chaos because of the storm that they had found themselves in. And that feels a lot like what some of us have been experiencing over the past 10 months. Isolation in the midst of chaos, right? That's pretty much what we've been through. And when we're caught in a storm, in isolation, that's where we need self-care the most. That's why it's so interesting that we see that Jesus was taking a little nappy poo on the boat in the middle of this storm, right?
Okay, but wait, it's not just like, when you're in the car on a long trip and you do like the Jello, like you're nodding off and you do the Jello neck, like head bob, right? You're
I
like,
love that so much.
Right? It's not like he dozed off. It says his head was on a cushion. Like, he took time to, like, oh, hey, you guys got the boat thing under control? Okay, good. Here, I'm gonna, like, make myself a little spot, get all cozy. Like, he made a little spot to nap. Like, that was a choice.
Yeah, he
like,
made
that
a purposeful choice.
Intentional.
Yeah,
I'm gonna go to sleep. You do the boat thing.
Yeah.
In a storm.
And like you and me, the disciples don't get how Jesus can possibly be this relaxed in the middle of the situation. Relax is actually not even a strong enough word. He wasn't relaxed. He was out. He was out. Like now, this moment, this is not a time for peace.
Yeah, the boat was filling with water.
Right. This is a time for anxiety. Like, this is not the time for self-care. This is the time to be anxious. To have like your anxiety go, like, what are you doing, Jesus? How can Jesus possibly be practicing self-care in this moment of isolation in the midst of chaos?
So in verse 39, it says, when Jesus woke up, he rebuked the wind and said to the waves, "Silence, be still." And suddenly the wind stopped and there was a great calm. And then he asked the disciples, "Why are you afraid? Do you still have no faith?" Okay, so this is one of those times I feel like when we're reading this story in Scripture, I think we can easily lose sight of like the gravity of the things that have happened. Because we have the benefit of knowing the end of the story. We know everything turns out okay. Jesus calms the storm. Great, not a problem. And that's where our brains go. We hold on to that piece of the story. But let's back up a little bit from the end of this story. So they're in a storm in a boat that was kind of like a larger sailboat. It's not a huge yacht, because like the bigger the boat, the more calm it is. Like cruise ships are real calm on choppy water. But it wasn't this tiny little rowboat either, so it wasn't completely life-threatening. But I don't know if you've ever been on a boat in choppy water. I was one time, and it was a larger boat. I wasn't in charge of controlling the boat.
Oh, you weren't?
No. But it was still very scary. Like, it wasn't even during a storm. It was like high winds. But let me tell you, if you don't hold on to something and hold on tight and don't even let go for a second, like, you're getting thrown around all over the place. It's scary. I can totally understand why the disciples were like, what the heck is happening, Jesus? So anyway, okay. So you gotta hang on to this boat somewhere, choppy water. It's frightening. And so for Jesus to sleep during this is crazy. And then it's just like, oh, and then when he woke up, like, oh yeah, right? Like, that's even nuttier. And then for him to say to his disciples, why are you afraid? We're afraid, Jesus, because we're about to die and you're sleeping. Like, you need to do something. Help us out here. But like so many other times in the Bible, when we see Jesus ask a question, it's not because he doesn't already know the answer. It's Jesus. He knows the answer to the question. But when he says, why are you afraid? He says it to point out something to his friends. See, Jesus knows the true source of peace. God, right? His connection, his relationship with God. And so he is able to be at peace in the midst of what appears to everyone else to be this terrible, life-threatening moment. They are afraid they're going to drown. Jesus has experienced true peace, and so he's able to command peace in the middle of chaos. Because Jesus knows this true source of peace, he is at peace within himself, and so he can bring peace to everyone around him.
Yeah, and Jesus could have chosen to get caught up in the same things the disciples were caught up in. But in the middle of isolation, in the middle of the chaos, Jesus chose instead to be focused on the unchanging reality of who God is. And that's why he was able to find peace and rest and self-care. So the question is, what do you choose? And what do you choose to get caught up in the middle of the isolation, in the middle of the chaos? What do you choose to focus on as your source of rest and peace and self-care? Don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with getting plenty of sleep. I mean, Jesus demonstrated that firsthand here, right? Like, there's nothing wrong with playing video games. Nothing wrong with drawing or reading or exercising. I think there is probably something wrong with taking, not even taking selfies, but practicing selfies in the mirror. Don't do that. But whatever it is that you do to relax and take care of yourself when things get stressful, there's nothing necessarily wrong with those things. I think it matters that we recognize that the only true, restorative way to care for ourselves is to block out the storms and block out the noise and block out the other stuff that's going on and focus on the unchanging reality of who God is. That's where real self-care is found.
Okay, so let's talk about some ways that we can practice true self-care. So some of the things that I do are I like to get outside. Where I live is not like in the middle of Ashburn. I'm out there in the western part of the county where we're on lots of land, and so there's just wildlife everywhere, and we have chickens, and it's just really fun to sometimes I just sit outside and just watch what's going on around me. All the animals, all the birds, the crazy chickens. Sometimes I take a walk. So there's something about being outside that feels restorative to me. And there are times that I'll just put on worship music because there really is something to this idea of whatever you take in, like whatever you feed yourself, it has an effect on how you feel physically and mentally and emotionally. So yeah, like watching a movie is not a bad idea. Watching Netflix for 8 hours straight, that's not going to be real fulfilling. What do you get?
Yeah, I mean, mine is honestly similar. I don't do it that often, honestly, but journaling has been a really important thing for me in terms of self-care. Like, when I need to take a moment, and sometimes I'll just do it on my phone. I'll do it in a note on my phone, and then after I'm done writing the note, I'll lock the note so that no one else can see it because it's between me and God or whatever, right? And but I'll just, if I've got something that's weighing heavy on me, like self-care for me just looks like, let me just bring that to God and act like, God, what do you think? What do you think about this thing that's weighing on me? So, conversation I had that was unpleasant or something that's stressing me out. Like, God, what do you think about this? Can you, what do you want to say to me about this? And then we just kind of go from there, and the conversation goes from there. And so for me, journaling, even just it doesn't have to be a fancy leather bound with, little flowers and whatever. Yes. Like, sometimes it just, that's fancy. It is fancy. It's the fanciest thing I could think of is flowers. But it doesn't even have to be like this fancy thing. Sometimes it's just taking out your phone and going, you know what, God, instead of using this phone to distract myself with social media or whatever, with memes, like, I'm just going to I'm going to use this phone right now to practice real self-care. Let's talk about some stuff.
Nice.
So that's what it looks like for me, and that's what it looks like for Brooke. And I don't know, maybe you'll have your own things. But whatever it looks like, our biggest prayer for you is that doing duck faces in the mirror is not how you're going to practice self-care. Like, that's our greatest prayer for you. No, we want for you to practice true self-care and to find your true self-care and your peace and your rest in Jesus. Because when Jesus was in a moment and the disciples were in a moment where they needed to take care of themselves and they needed to fix a situation, like, Jesus was able to find peace because he found it in the context of the reality of who God is. And I think that we should follow Jesus' example in that. So hopefully, I don't know, January's not great. And we recognize that. And like, there might be some times where it's hard and it's lonely, but we hope that you can find real self-care in the midst of it. The end?
The end.
All right, cool. Bye.